Okay, do you agree to be recorded during this interview?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name and credentials in your career.
Ariel Lynn Filtz, and I am a certified athletic trainer.
Okay, do you think different injuries make a difference on the recovery process?
Yes, different injuries do make a difference. Let's say if you have an ankle sprain, that recovery process is going to take a lot longer versus a broken bone or even a torn ligament. Torn ligaments often require surgery, whereas ankle rehab requires only a few weeks of physical therapy, and broken bones can last a few weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, just to heal.
Okay, do you think different injuries will affect athletes' performance later in their career?
Yes, depending on the injury, it can affect their performance. For myself, tearing my ACL really affected the way I could cut and move in playing soccer, so I wasn't able to play soccer very well again after I tore my ACL. Also, there's that mental aspect where after an injury, sometimes athletes have a hard time getting over that fear of re-tearing something or injuring something again. So there's both physical and mental aspects to the recovery process.
Okay, how likely is someone who has torn their ACL able to come back to playing?
They're usually 100% likely to come back. It really also depends, again, on the mental aspect of it. Also, it kind of depends on the type of physical therapy that the person is getting. There's different types of physical therapy. You can have physical therapy that's going to return you just to daily activities of living, walking, doing things around the house. That's going to be for somebody that's a little bit older and not looking to get back into their sport, compared to somebody who's in high school who wants to get back to playing football or soccer. Their rehab is going to be a lot more rigorous in the long run. But in terms of returning back to the sport, it's very likely that they can return even after something as serious as an ACL sprain or an ACL tear or a broken bone.
Do you think they'd be able to come back to their full potential?
That's difficult to say. It's usually different from athlete to athlete. You can kind of tell, even looking at pro athletes sometimes, if their performance has gone down or gone up since a life-altering injury. It just depends, again, on your mental aspect, getting back out there. The mental part of it, of recovery, is just as important as the physical part, because that's something that you're going to have to overcome when you're out in the field again.
Okay. How likely is a person who's broken their finger to come back and continue their sport?
It's very likely if they break a finger, but if you break a thumb in a certain way, thumbs are very tricky because sometimes they require casting and surgery. If you break a finger a certain way, you can need surgery, but most of the time if you just break a pinky finger or ring finger, chances are you could probably, depending on the sport, you could just go back in there same day, 5 minutes later if you wrap it up.
Do you think it will make a big difference in their performance?
With a broken finger?
Yes.
Again, it depends on the sport. Let's say if you're playing golf, yeah, it's going to make a huge difference if you're trying to swing a club and hold on to the golf club with a broken finger. But if you're playing football, you can buddy wrap it, buddy tape it, and be good to go and put it back out there.
If you have too many concussions, how will it affect the athletes playing and their life later on?
More concussions ultimately mean that they're more susceptible each time after having a concussion. So somebody who's had 3 concussions is more susceptible than the person that has 1 concussion to get one easier, faster, just by smaller hits. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
In the long run, it's also been shown, research has shown that athletes have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's with an increase amount of concussions throughout their athletic career. So it's certain things that kids need to think about when they do sustain a concussion. They need to realize the long-term effects of going back out on the playing field too soon, even with a concussion.
Okay. If an athlete breaks their ankle, how will it affect their later performance?
I think it depends on the rehabilitation and what the goals are of the rehab. If you're just looking to, again, go back to daily activities, not really going back into any like rigorous or intense sport activities, your rehab's going to be a little bit different. And again, the mental aspect also has an effect on that as well.
Okay, so on that topic, do you think it is a good idea to go through physical therapy after an injury?
Depending on the injury, yes, I think it's always a great idea to go to physical therapy. You learn new ways to do exercises. You just increase your overall health and wellness. So physical therapy is never, ever a bad idea for any injury. It's always a good idea.
Do you think the ability to come back to full strength is more psychological or like their performance?
I would have to say it's about 70-30 or maybe 60-40 mental, because you really have to overcome a lot of barriers when you're trying to come back from an injury, and those really do have a huge effect, more so than the physical aspect of it on the playing field after a massive injury. Speaking from my personal experience going back on the soccer field after my ACL rehab for a year, I wasn't the same person. I couldn't go back on the soccer field. I was too scared. I couldn't do it. And it just always felt like my knee was going to pop again. So when you're receiving physical therapy too, you have to think about it as like a whole body therapy. You're not just treating the body, you also have to treat the mind. You also have to rehab the mind too, to kind of get you physically and mentally ready to go back out on the playing field.
Okay. Do you think that informing an athlete of other people's stories is a good idea?
Of their personal injuries
Yeah.
stories? Yeah, only because it makes them feel more comfortable. So let's say I'm talking to somebody, Adam, who recently tore his ACL this past season. Having him to relate back to me about his ACL tear, I think was huge, because he didn't feel alone, and you feel like you are not the only one going through it. So I think just that misery loves company, relating to other people type thing has a huge impact too.
Okay. Do you think that even the smallest injuries can take a toll on a person's body after their sport?
In the long run, yes. As you get older, you start to hurt a lot more. So even smaller injuries, just if you're running a lot and you start to get some tendonitis in your knee or arthritis, yeah, it does start to affect you, and starts to hurt a lot more as you get older. So little things start to kind of compound on top of each other, and it just makes it harder to be more active.
So if there's somebody like me that who's broke their thumb and can't really bend it, do you think that will play a big toll later on?
Later on, yeah. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of scar tissue build up in there, so it's gonna be a lot harder to move it. And as you get older, it's just gonna tend to just get even more stiff. So you're not gonna have a lot of range of motion in your thumb. It's just gonna kind of be stuck there, because there's a really good window of opportunity after an injury to kind of break off the scar tissue. It's very painful, but you have to do it in order so you have that range of motion later on. So if you have multiple injuries like you have had to your thumb, it's gonna make it a lot harder for the rehab every time.
Even going to physical therapy, I didn't feel much of a difference in the stiffness and the scar tissue.
So it was still,
yeah. So
you weren't able to move it?
What else would help with that?
forcing it to move, breaking off the scar tissue. You really have to, it's going to be painful. It's a painful process. It's not going to be fun. So if you push yourself to go past that pain, then and you break off that scar tissue, then you'll probably have that range of motion back.
Okay. And then last question, is there anything else on this topic you would like to add?
Just as an athlete, be sure to, if you're having a hard time going back out on the playing field after an injury, make sure you're also taking care of the mental side of it, because that's just as important, if not more important, because you have a lot of barriers to overcome. Are we good?
Yeah, thank you.
15 minutes?